Welcome to Rhomany's Realm. I'm Rhomany, and today I've got a witchy Q&A for you. A subscriber contacted me recently with a question, and as you know, I've always said I don't want to teach witchcraft as such. I prefer to work on the Book of Shadows end of things. However, I don't have a problem with answering general questions, so this was a really interesting question and I thought it would be a good one to address. Now, the lady in question asked that I keep her details private, and I'm going to do that. Just a general gist of the question is, I had to make a really big decision. I've asked for a sign, and I'm not getting anything. What do you recommend? Okay, that's the general idea behind her question. Signs are a bit tricky, in my experience, and you have to break it down and ask yourself certain questions. Are you paying attention? Particularly if you're expecting a certain answer or hoping for a certain answer, it can be very easy to simply not recognise signs for what they are. The god or goddess that you have called on, what is their modus operandi? What is their general thinking on problem solving? So if you've called on the Morrigan and her message is put on your big girl panties and deal with it, as it quite often is, she may be sending you crows or ravens, or she could be putting Celtic symbols in your path to help you along the way. And you really need to be open to accepting those symbols and signs, not just getting an answer of yes, you're doing great, keep up the good work. The second thing to consider is whether you're looking for signs that validate your decision and excluding others. Now, just because signs are saying, no, this isn't the right decision, doesn't mean you've done it wrong, okay? The tricky thing is with decisions is that you have to wait for the consequences to evolve. So today, saying, have I done the right thing? Well, as things stand, perhaps no. It's the most god-awful thing you could have done because everything's much worse than it was yesterday. But in 2 months' time, or 3 months' time, or 4 months' time, or 2 years' time, it could have been the best decision you ever made. It's all dependent on timing. So be careful of ignoring signs that don't gel with what you want to hear. We all do it. It's a human thing. So don't feel bad if that's what you've been doing. When you're looking for signs, don't just look for validation. Look for things that are giving you warnings or giving you nudges to say, well, you're kind of going in the right direction, but you kind of want to go this way a little bit. If you've asked for signs, you will be getting advice. And advice is not always what you want to hear. So do bear that in mind. The next thing to consider is, have you asked the right questions? Did you phrase your question in the right way? You can't just say, give me a sign. Well, what sign do you want? What sign do you want something about? Have you been specific enough? Have you said, this is what I'm dealing with, I've decided this, I would like a sign that tells me if this is the right thing, or, what do you want to find out? What are you trying to get? The pagan gods, as we use them, are not in any way similar to the Christian ideology of an omnipotent God who is always watching and always present and always there and knows what's going on at all times. Our gods and goddesses are a bit more like commuters on a train. You may pass a stranger on a commute and they will completely ignore you because they have no need to interact with you. But if you stop that commuter and say, excuse me, I want to ask you a question, and you ask them a question that they can answer, and it's a sensible question that's phrased in a correct way, like, for instance, excuse me, do you happen to know what the time is, please? Then that commuter will probably turn around and say, yeah, actually, I've got to check their watch, and, it's 2:15, If they don't have a watch on them, then they will turn around and tell you, no, I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't have a clock on me. And you know to go and ask someone else. Our gods and goddesses are very much the same way. If they don't have a reason to interact with you, then they won't. And if you stop them and ask them a question that doesn't make any sense, then they're going to look at you like you're crazy and move on. So you've got to think of it like the commuter on the train. If you stop your average stranger and say, "Excuse me, do you know if giraffes' legs bend backwards or not?" they're going to give you a wide berth, okay? You're asking a question that person doesn't know the answer to, doesn't understand why you're asking them. It's out of context. It makes no sense to ask a stranger that. You'd go and Google it. So when you're thinking about the questions that you ask for signs, you have to ask the right deity. You can't just open it up to, can the gods and goddesses give me a sign? You've got to ask somebody who knows what they're talking about. So if you are asking, for instance, advice on relationships, then you want to talk to a god or goddess that deals with love and home and family and that kind of thing. You don't want to be asking the Morrigan, because the Morrigan is about other stuff. Yeah? The Morrigan is the one that gives you a kick in the pants when you need it. She's not the one that you go to be all lovey-dovey and that kind of stuff. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, could be a more suitable deity. Again, it depends on what your question is. If your question is, I don't know, let's throw it out, should I get a divorce, for instance, that goes against Aphrodite's idea of love and compassion and togetherness and all that kind of stuff. It's possible you won't get an answer from her that is in your best interests. So you have to direct your questions to the right deity. You can't just open it up to the gods and goddesses, because a very good example is Loki, for instance. There's very little chance of ever getting a straight answer out of Loki, and if you do, it's probably not the right answer, because he's a trickster. So you're opening yourselves up to opinions as opposed to signs. To put it in context, you know, if you put out there, say on social media, should I get a divorce? 5,000 people are going to give you 5,000 different answers, depending on their experience. They don't know what you're going through. Should I get a better job? Should I leave this job and find another one? Should I make my own business? Well, their answers are going to depend on their experience and their perceptions. You've got to put it in context. You've got to go to the right people, and you've got to talk to them about where you're at and what your circumstances are. In essence, you wouldn't go to a career advisor about a twinge in your back. You'd go to your doctor, and your doctor would refer you to somebody who can specify what the problem is, okay? That's the way you need to look at it. You need to look at it as going to who you think is the most logical deity to ask or speak to, and then moving it towards whittling it down to a specific deity who can give you the signs that you really need and the right answers. And, you know, if all else fails, you could ask for assistance from your spirit guide or your totem or your adopted deities. You know, we all have deities that we use regularly. Perhaps ask them for some guidance on who would be the best deity to approach in this situation, and, you know, lay out the ideas, lay out the situation, lay out the issues that you've got, lay out the choices that you've made, and say, well, who do you think would be best to help me out with this, and let me know if what I'm doing is the right thing for me. And then that goddess or totem or deity or spirit guide or whatever can help you with your particular issue and say, oh yeah, I know just the person, you know, and they will send you on the right path to help you find the signs that you need. There is also the possibility that not getting signs is a sign. And again, this is a Morrigan trait. Not getting signs from the Morrigan doesn't necessarily mean she's ignoring you. Sometimes it can mean that she's making you stand on your own 2 feet and have some courage of your own convictions. Perhaps you're being taught a lesson. Is this the first major decision where you've really gone out on a limb and done it for yourself? Perhaps you're being asked to have courage and to follow your own heart and your own decisions rather than be influenced by others. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you won't get some kind of validation. You could still get validation, but it might be more subtle. Or it might come later on when consequences of your actions have evolved and you receive validation, or you receive a sign that says, kind of went a little bit wrong there. Here's a bit more what you need to do. To quote John Cusack in Serendipity, sometimes the absence of signs is a sign. And it could just be as simple as it's too early to tell. You know, our deities are not omnipotent. They don't know everything. Perhaps the decisions that you've made, even they don't know how it's going to work out yet. Perhaps they're waiting to see how things evolve. That being said, if you're absolutely certain that you're not getting signs, there is absolutely no harm in asking again. As I said, go to your adopted deity and ask them for guidance, or ask for spirit guidance or totem guidance or whatever. Look up another deity. Perhaps the deity that you've called on can't address your question. If you just put it out there to the gods and goddesses, just give me a sign, then perhaps you need to be more specific. It does need to go out to the gods and goddesses generally, but you need to say, well, this is the decision I've made. I just want to know if I'm doing the right thing. Or, here's the decision I've made. These are the consequences that are happening because of it, and I'm okay with that. What do I need to be aware of in the future that could also happen that I may want to deal with preemptively? You know, engage in conversation with your deity. Don't just stand there going, give me a sign. It doesn't work like that. Now, I'm not saying that the lady in question has done that by any means. I'm just saying that it's tempting when you're asking for a validation. You throw it out to the universe, show me that I'm doing the right thing. Doing the right thing about what? They haven't been paying attention to what you were talking about. They're not watching every move you make. They don't know that you've just made a major decision. They could be answering a question that you haven't asked because they're assuming what you're asking us for a sign about, if that makes sense. So be specific. Ask the right deity and accept the answers that you get, because you might have to rethink your actions. You might have to rethink your question. You might have to prepare for further difficult times along the road, because although you've made the right decision now, things are going to get worse before they get better. And don't disregard signs just because they don't agree with what you think or what you want to hear. Be open to various possibilities, because it might be that although you've made a specific decision, and it is a good decision, that there is a better option waiting for you that perhaps is not available to you now. But by following the path that you're on and taking on board the signs and warnings that you're given, you could open the door to something even better. That would be an even better decision for you, and you could say, hey, I'm doing this. This is where I'm heading. So that's my views on signs. Obviously everybody's got different things, but that is how I look at signs and asking deities for validation of decisions and things like that. So I hope you've enjoyed today's little Q&A and our little paint along. If you are curious, I am working in my Book of Shadows. I am working on a page that addresses seeking signs, asking for signs. My pen that I'm using, because I know a lot of people will ask, is my Jinhao Dragon pen. I am using Red Dragon ink from Diamine in it. And my sketch was done initially in graphite, and then I've gone over it in watercolour, and I'm using my Sakura Koi watercolours with various different brushes. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you all again next week. Bye!